Imagine dedicating over 3 decades of your life to mastering, like, a highly specific physical craft. You know the exact weight of your tools. You understand the subtle vibrations of the machinery.
Right, you can literally feel perfection with your bare hands.
Exactly. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe on your commute or, while you're making dinner, think about your own core skill. The thing you do better than anyone else in your workplace.
The thing that defines your value, essentially.
Yeah, your identity. Now, I want you to imagine having your entire livelihood, your daily purpose, just erased in a single afternoon by a few lines of code.
It's a staggering transition to even conceptualize because we're so used to thinking of career obsolescence as this slow fade, right? Like a gradual sunset of an industry over decades.
Like the switchboard operators or something.
Exactly. But increasingly, for so many people, it is instantaneous, just a flip of a switch.
And that brings us to the source material for today. We're doing a deep dive into this brilliant short documentary script titled The Last Shift, The Day the Machine Replaced Me.
And it drops you right into the aftermath of that switch flipping.
It really does.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's last Tuesday, 4 p.m. Peter, who is a 52-year-old master CNC machinist, along with 31 of his coworkers, is simply handed a cardboard box.
That's brutal.
Right. They're laid off. And it isn't because the company went bankrupt or because they were bad at their jobs. It is because a 28-year-old employee who actually happens to be Peter's own nephew, Brad.
Wow. Yeah, that family dynamic makes it so intense.
Oh, it makes it gut-wrenching. Brad is a data analyst and AI implementer, and he loaded a Python script into a centralized cloud server. That's it.
And that specific detail is crucial to everything that unfolds in this 25-minute conversation between the two of them, because it wasn't a shiny new robot physically walking onto the factory floor to, push Peter out of the way.
Right. It was completely invisible, just code. So to really understand the weight of that invisible force, we need to look at Peter's intense pride in his work. He's sitting there at the start of the script, literally physically holding a titanium gear.
Yeah, he's gripping it.
And he explains to Brad that for 24 years at this plant, he didn't need a laser and he didn't need a digital gauge. He could feel a 2-micron tolerance on the inner flange of that gear using just his thumb.
Which is wild.
Skin, oil, and sweat. That was his quality control. And let's, ground that for the listener for a second. A single human hair is roughly 70 to 100 microns thick.
Oh, wow. So he's feeling right.
He is feeling a variation that is a fraction of a cellular width, just through sheer human experience.
Which is just an absolute marvel of human neuroplasticity and physical mastery. I mean, the brain rewiring itself over 30 years to turn a thumb into a microscopic sensor.
It's beautiful, honestly.
It is. But then Brad explains what the technology is actually doing, and you start to see the harsh reality of the corporate perspective. Because this Python script isn't just a basic set of instructions for cutting metal. Brad explains that it's an adaptive neural net.
Wait, but how does a script actually replace a biological sensor like Peter's thumb? Like, the text mentions it predicts fractures, but how is a cloud server doing that?
Right. Well, it comes down to data processing speeds that humans simply cannot match. The AI isn't feeling the metal. It's actually listening to it.
Listening to it? You mean literally hearing the machine?
Yeah. It monitors the acoustic frequencies and microvibrations of the drill bit spinning in real time. So a microscopic change in pitch, like a frequency shift utterly undetectable to the human ear, tells the AI that the metal is stressing.
That is insane.
And because of that, it can predict a microfracture 3 hours before the metal actually snaps, and then it adjusts the machine's feed rate on the fly to compensate.
Oh, so it fixes the problem before it's even a problem.
Exactly. Peter's thumb is brilliant, but Peter can only tell you if the gear is perfect after it has been cut. The AI mathematically eliminates the waste before the waste even happens.
Okay, I understand the mathematical efficiency there. I really do. But let me throw a different lens on this. Corporate framing always presents automatization, labor automation as this natural, inevitable evolution.
Right, like it's just the next step.
Yeah, they talk about it like it's weather, like rain or sunshine. But it's not just replacing the horse with the tractor. It's replacing the farmer who decides when to plant the seeds.
That's a good point.
So is this framing actually ignoring a very conscious choice by these companies, a choice to trade a human heartbeat and decades of lived experience for a zero-error margin?
Well, what's fascinating here is that I have to push back a little on the idea that this is purely a cold, malicious choice by leadership.
Okay, play devil's advocate for me.
If we look at the boardroom's fiduciary reality, trading a human for a zero-error margin is often viewed as a matter of absolute survival. The script mentions this viral internet hook you see everywhere right now. Me despidieron por un código. I was fired by a code.
Yeah, I've seen that phrase going around.
Right, and the internet treats it as this harsh, modern truth we all just have to swallow.
But Peter refuses to swallow it. He pushes back on Brad's technical defense and says something that's just devastating. He says, I didn't just lose my paycheck. I lost my hands. I lost my morning routine.
And that hits so hard because we constantly underestimate the psychological scaffolding the job provides.
Yeah, the structure.
Exactly. It dictates when you wake up, who you interact with, how you expend your physical energy, and frankly, how you measure your worth at the end of the day.
Right.
When an algorithm suddenly removes that scaffolding, the loss extends way beyond the financial aspect. It is a profound destabilization of a person's entire identity.
So if the corporation views him as a biological inefficiency, what happens to Peter's sense of self? Because for over 30 years, when someone asked him at a barbecue or a diner, what do? He had a simple, profoundly active answer. He'd say, I build things.
Yeah, an identity deeply rooted in creation. He takes raw material and transforms it into something valuable.
But now, looking at this new AI landscape, Peter feels reduced to a mere consumer. He actually looks at his nephew and asks, am I just a data point for your algorithms to market cheap groceries to?
Oof.
Yeah. When the physical act of doing disappears, Peter feels the man disappears right along with it.
And Brad's response to this identity crisis is what you hear echoed in every tech symposium and economic forum around the world right now. It's the mandate to upskill.
Ah, the famous buzzword, upskill.
Right. Brad talks about what his peers ask him, ¿Qué estudiar in 2026? What to study in 2026 to stay relevant.
Because clearly, precision metalwork is no longer the safe bet it was in 1995. So what does Brad actually advise people to do?
Well, Brad advises a complete retreat from physical manipulation. He tells people the future is in prompt engineering, system oversight, and emotional management.
Wait, prompt engineering, like typing commands into a chat box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To break that down, prompt engineering is essentially learning how to speak the AI's language. It's knowing exactly what text commands or parameters to type into the system so the neural net generates the specific output you want.
Got it.
So the underlying message is that the machine will handle the physical execution, and humans just need to manage the machine's parameters.
Okay, listen to Peter's exact analogy from the text regarding that transition, because it perfectly captures his frustration. He says that telling a 52-year-old master craftsman to upskill by sitting in a cubicle and clicking boxes to validate the AI's output.
Yeah, validating the machine.
He says it's like asking a master chef to watch a microwave heat up a frozen meal and then calling him a culinary consultant.
That is such a brilliant comparison. It isolates the exact feeling of displacement. Because the skills he is being asked to learn, typing prompts and clicking validation boxes, they don't utilize his deep tactile expertise at all.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate for Peter here, because I think anyone listening who has spent years honing a skill would feel the exact same way.
Oh, absolutely.
For a guy who could feel a 2-micron variance, is clicking a mouse to validate a Python script actually upskilling? Or is it, as Peter bluntly calls it, psychological humiliation disguised as a promotion?
Oh, man, that's heavy. But let's examine the brutal calculus of Brad's macroeconomic defense before we look at the emotional toll. Because Brad's argument is grounded in a terrifying reality for these manufacturing firms.
What he calls the crisis economica, IA, right? The AI economic crisis.
Exactly. Brad points out that if Peter's plant in the US or the UK decides to protect human pride and refuses to implement that Python script, a competitor in Seoul, Frankfurt, or Shenzhen definitely will.
Right. And that competitor will produce the titanium gears for half the price, twice as fast, with 0 microfractures.
Which means Peter's company goes completely bankrupt within a year. Brad is desperately trying to explain to his uncle that the AI wasn't brought in to humiliate him.
Right, it wasn't personal.
No, it was brought in to keep the building's lights on in a hyper-competitive global market. If they don't automate, it isn't just 32 people getting cardboard boxes. All 100 people at the plant lose their livelihoods.
Wow.
So Brad views the Python script as a lifeboat, even if it only has room for 2/3 of the crew.
And that macro-level justification opens the door to a very familiar historical debate. Brad tries to comfort Peter by pointing out that society has survived massive technological shifts before.
Oh, the classic historical parallel.
Right. He brings up the 19th century weavers who literally smashed mechanical looms because they were terrified of losing their livelihoods. And he mentions how horses lost their entire societal function to the Model T Ford.
Yeah, Brad's argument essentially boils down to take a deep breath, Uncle Pete. This current AI implementation is just the next phase of a historical pattern we have always managed to survive.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because Peter absolutely dismantles that logic.
No, he completely takes it apart.
He looks at Brad and delivers this incredibly sharp rebuttal. He says, the horse didn't have to figure out how to pay a mortgage. The horse didn't have to look its daughter in the eye and say, I can't pay for your college semester because a software update rendered my life's work obsolete.
And that just completely pierces the emotional detachment of Brad's historical theory. It forces the conversation out of the textbook and back into the living room.
Yeah, the real world. And Peter goes even further into the actual mechanics of the labor shift. He argues that the mechanical loom only replaced the weaver's hands. The factory still needed the human brain to manage the floor, fix the jams, oversee the process.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But Peter argues this AI crisis is fundamentally different. It is taking the hands and the brain. So how does that distinction change the entire conversation we should be having about worker displacement?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Peter has identified the exact threshold that makes the AI revolution profoundly distinct from the Industrial Revolution.
Right, it's not just a faster loom.
No, not at all. Historically, automation has always been about muscle. We built machines to lift heavier things, to weave faster, to transport goods further, and humans retreated up the cognitive ladder. We became the supervisors of the muscle.
We moved from the factory floor to the air-conditioned office.
Precisely. But AI is cognitive automation. It is the machine climbing up the ladder right behind us. When that adaptive neural net can predict a tool fracture 3 hours in advance by listening to acoustic frequencies, it is doing the cognitive reasoning that the human supervisor used to do. Peter's profound fear is the central anxiety of our time. What is left for humans when both physical execution and cognitive oversight are successfully automated?
And Brad attempts to answer that by pointing to empathy. He suggests that the human element is all that remains. A machine can find a data pattern, but it doesn't understand why that pattern matters to a human being.
Which, sounds lovely in a sociology seminar. But Peter is a pragmatist facing a mortgage. He coldly reminds his nephew that corporate America does not pay a salary for empathy.
Nope, they pay for tangible output.
Exactly. And currently, due to the Python script Brad implemented, Peter's output is 0.
That realization really forces Brad to confront his own complicity in this entire system. It brings us to the most vulnerable part of their conversation, focusing on the architect's guilt.
Yeah, Brad is basically the one building the very cage they're discussing.
Right. He admits he feels guilty. He's the one optimizing the data pipelines that make these systems smarter and faster. When his own peers ask him what to study in 2026, he tells them to study anything the machine can't simulate yet.
But he confesses to Peter that the list of things the machine cannot simulate is shrinking every single month.
So if you're listening to this and wondering the same thing, if Brad knows he is building a cage, why does he keep writing the code? Why not just stop?
He keeps writing it because of the inevitability factor. Brad explains that the momentum of the technology is too massive for one individual or even one company to halt. If he steps away, the code still gets written by someone else tomorrow.
So much cheaper, probably.
Exactly. But Brad's internal justification is that by staying in the room, by being one of the architects, he hopes he can advocate for a transition that is humane. He doesn't want society to simply discard humans like obsolete hardware when their output reaches 0.
And this leads him to bring up systemic safety nets. He talks about concepts like universal basic income UBI or an automation tax.
Right, the idea that if the machines are generating all the capital and doing all the labor, we tax the companies utilizing those machines and distribute the money to the citizens.
To fund human-centric arts, local trades, and allow people to survive without traditional employment.
Because Brad is looking for a systemic economic solution to a systemic economic problem, he is trying to separate the concept of survival from the concept of employment.
Yeah. But Peter delivers a crushing reality check to that utopian vision. He tells Brad that a government check to keep him quiet won't give him back his pride.
Yeah.
He says vulnerability isn't just an empty bank account, it's an empty day. It's waking up at 6 a.m. with no energy outlet, no complex problem to solve, and no legacy to build.
That's the real crisis right there.
It is. Can an economic safety net like UBI ever truly compensate for the loss of a community and that deeply ingrained human need to feel necessary?
This raises an important question, maybe the most important philosophical question of our lifetime. Economics can solve the problem of starvation, but it cannot solve the problem of nihilism.
Nihilism, wow. Yeah.
Humans are fundamentally problem-solving creatures, right?
Mm.
We derive our self-worth, our dopamine, our sense of purpose from overcoming friction.
Oh, I like that. Overcoming friction.
Yeah. And if a machine removes all the friction from our daily lives, if it makes the perfect year, writes the perfect code, plans the perfect logistics, and the government simply hands us a stipend to exist.
Right.
Peter is arguing that we will face an unprecedented crisis of meaning. He tells Brad, you cannot tax a server farm to fund a sense of personal pride.
Let's just pause and let that sink in.
Yeah.
You cannot tax a server farm to fund a sense of personal pride. That gets right to the core of what we stand to lose. It's not just about the money.
It's about the soul of the worker. But Brad does make a final, somewhat desperate plea to his uncle to rethink his value.
Yeah, he tells Peter to change his legacy. Instead of focusing on the physical output of the gears, Brad says, teach me. Teach the next generation.
Because while the machine knows the mathematical feed rate of the titanium, it absolutely does not know the story of the man who spent 30 years struggling toward mastery.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. The machine can simulate the process, but it cannot simulate the lived human experience.
And you really see a shift in Peter in that final moment of the script.
You do. He looks at the gear, he thinks about that viral phrase, me despidieron por un código, and he realizes something vital. The company may have dismantled the community on the factory floor, but the code doesn't get the last word on his life's meaning.
He does.
He does, because his history, his 30 years of oil and sweat, belongs entirely to him.
It is a profound moment of resilience. It is Peter realizing his value is no longer tied to his physical output, but rather to his enduring humanity.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize this deep dive into Peter and Brad's story, we're looking at a massive paradox. AI automation brings undeniable zero-error efficiency. As Brad pointed out, it is a necessary tool for corporate survival in an interconnected, globalized world.
Definitely.
But simultaneously, it creates an immense vacuum of identity and purpose for the human worker. And as Peter so clearly articulated, that is a gap that cannot simply be filled by putting a 52-year-old in a cubicle to learn prompt engineering, and it certainly cannot be filled by a universal basic income check.
It really requires a fundamental rewiring of how we perceive human value. We have spent the last 300 years since the Industrial Revolution defining ourselves by what we produce. You know, I build things, I write things, I analyze things.
Right.
That era of defining ourselves strictly by our output is closing.
Which brings us entirely back to you listening right now, whether you are a master machinist, a data analyst, a writer, or anything in between. As Brad warned, the list of things a machine cannot do is shrinking every single month.
It really is.
Eventually, that shrinking list is going to force all of us to redefine our value beyond just our daily output.
And I will leave you with this final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If the ultimate destination of this AI revolution is a world where machines handle all the doing, what new definition of work will you invent for yourself when your daily problems have all been solved by a Python script? When the cardboard box arrives and your hands are suddenly empty, what will you reach for next?
A huge thank you for joining us in this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.